I've been married to David for 7 years. His first love has returned. In just a glance, he let go of our child's hand and walked straight towards that woman. And my child was lost. Anna had a high fever, so David and I took her to the nearby hospital. He took her upstairs to the doctor's office while I went to the first floor to pay the medical bills. When I returned, they had both disappeared. I tried calling David, but no one answered. Maybe he took Anna to the restroom. But even after searching everywhere, I couldn't hear Anna's voice. Where could he have taken her with a fever? Confused, at the end of the hallway, I saw him talking to a woman, and there was no child beside them. The woman's silhouette in front of him was all too familiar to me. It was Gina, the white moonlight he left with 6 years ago. Has she returned now? As I approached, before I could say anything, Gina smiled and said, "Sophia, what brings you here?" Her appearance was just as it was when she left, very beautiful. Though I had never met her, I had seen her photos many times. But I didn't like her. I called out to David. He looked at me, and I asked him, "Where's Anna?" He turned around, saw the empty chair, and looked panicked. Raising my voice, I asked again, "David, where's Anna?" Before he could respond, I turned and walked away. I kept calling Anna's name, almost searching the entire floor, but couldn't find her anywhere. Just as I was about to go to the security room to check the cameras, I heard an announcement that a child named Anna had been found. I rushed over and found her sitting in a chair, her face all red, tears still wet. When she saw me, she immediately burst into tears. The staff said an elderly person tried to take her away, but she kept crying, catching the attention of the security guards. I walked up to her and without waiting for her to speak, I made her put her hand out. I slapped her hand hard and said, "Anna, didn't I tell you not to go with strangers?" She cried even harder. David, standing beside me, grabbed my wrist and asked, "Sophia, why did you hit the child?" I shook his hand off, slapped him hard, and now I couldn't even stand to look at him. Anna, seeing my grim expression, grabbed my hand, crying and intermittently saying, "Mom, I looked for you for so long, couldn't find you. That lady said she would bring me to you." I hugged her, patting her back gently, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Anna, Mommy's to blame." She had told me before about a child in her kindergarten whose parents divorced. Neither of them wanted him, so they left him with his grandma. I had been paying attention to Anna's emotions during that time, but I never expected her to remember that. Leaning on my shoulder, even through our clothes, I could feel her burning temperature. I turned to look at David, his eyes filled with guilt. He slowly squatted down to speak to Anna, but before he could finish, I picked up the child from the chair and walked away. I didn't want to hear his explanations. Over these years, the only person on his mind had always been Gina. Fine, if he didn't love me. But Anna, she's his child too. She's innocent. Who would have thought that he would leave a child alone in a chair? After checking on Anna, getting her on 4 fluids, she fell asleep in my arms. David wanted to talk to me several times, but I didn't want to listen, so I just closed my eyes. Just thinking about what Anna had said made my heart ache. She's my life, no one can touch her, not even David. When Anna woke up, she tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "Mom, I want water." I sat her on a nearby chair, took out a bottle of water from my bag, and offered it to her. After a moment, I saw David approaching with a takeout box from a private kitchen. When Anna saw him, she smiled, opened her arms, asking David to pick her up. Before David could lift her, a familiar voice called out to him, "David, my mom needs to go for a checkup, can you help?" David looked at me, then at Anna. I held him back, quietly asking, "Anna is sick, and you're going to help Gina?" "Sophia, Gina's a single woman, she needs help," he replied. He then kissed Anna on the forehead and hurriedly left. Pitiful people in the world, there was only Gina in his eyes. Even when his daughter was almost abducted, his reaction was indifferent. His coldness vanished whenever Gina was around. Not even Anna could compete with a single thought of Gina. Well, their child, who he didn't even love, was worthy of his affection. While Dad was gone, Anna kept asking, where did he go? She sat on my lap, her head against my chin, whispering softly, Anna, Daddy's gone to do a good deed. Mom, Anna wants to find Daddy. She kept saying it, so I took her out to get some fresh air. I felt suffocated in the infusion room. Holding Anna's medicine bottle, I just walked through the corridor and saw David and Gina hugging each other. They looked like they should be the couple, and I felt like I was intruding. Gina's gaze met mine, with a hint of a smile that seemed provocative. Anna called out, Daddy. David instinctively pushed Gina away. When he turned around, our eyes met. I had a faint smile on my face, watching this absurd scene unfold, and couldn't help but laugh softly. Anna didn't know what I was laughing about. She looked at me and then at David. I called out to Anna, pulling her away. She asked me, Mom, who is that lady? I didn't answer, unsure of how to respond. Children don't hold grudges. But I was no longer a child. On the way back, I didn't say a word. Anna was tired and just kept sleeping. I carried her into the room, and David wanted to take her, but I just walked past him stiffly. After leaving the children's room, I saw David standing at the door, and as soon as he saw me, he started to explain, Sophia, I didn't mean to lose Anna. Hearing him say that, I couldn't help but laugh mockingly. She was almost abducted by traffickers. David, what were you doing? I met his eyes, walked slowly up to him, pointing at his heart and said, ask yourself, besides you, is Gina the most important? Even Anna comes after her. He frowned slightly and remained silent. I went into the kitchen, poured a glass of water for him, and placed it in front of him. We've been married for 7 years, and I have no regrets. Our fate has come to an end, let's get divorced. The water in his hand trembled, as if he wanted to explain again. But I didn't want to hear it. I've known him since I was 7, followed him, always chasing after him. But he never looked back at me. Because he had Gina by his side, which was enough for him. He didn't say anything more, and I didn't speak either. I was about to go back to the room to pack, when he suddenly grabbed my arm, Sophia. Before he could finish speaking, I cut him off, David, I don't want you anymore. 7 years of marriage. I never thought that he had never loved me. He never even had a flicker of affection. We grew up together, our families lived nearby. We got married because of our similar backgrounds. When I found out he agreed to marry me, I happily linked arms with him. I asked him, do you really want to marry me? He agreed. Then there was endless silence. When we were in college, we lived in different cities. Occasionally, we stayed in touch by phone. I didn't know he had an unrequited crush. I only found out after we got married. He didn't allow me to look through his albums or open his safe. Just because they contained memories of him and Gina's youth. I knew Gina's name from his friends. It now seems ridiculous. At that young age, I thought that as long as I was good to him, he would surely come to like me. But looking back now, I was deluding myself. I packed my bags, took a few of Anna's clothes. I coaxed Anna into going to my dad's place. As soon as the old man saw his granddaughter, he welcomed her, picking her up. I didn't have such treatment when I was a child. My dad was always busy, and I didn't have a mom. I practically grew up in David's house. My dad saw me return, didn't dare to ask much, just played with Anna every day. I stayed at home for a few days, and David moved back to his house. When Anna saw him, she ran over, shouting, Daddy, I missed you so much. While urging me to hurry. She had just finished cooking the ribs and her hands were oily. He didn't mind, took the ribs from Anna's hands and ate them alongside her. I want to talk to him about getting a divorce. Ask Auntie to take Anna home. Standing still, I asked him, when are you free? Let's get the divorce. He stared at me without blinking. In a low voice, he asked, Sophia, do we really have to get divorced? Hearing his question, I couldn't hold back and slowly started to laugh. Before I could finish laughing, I saw someone in the distance, walking towards us with a child. It was Gina. As she approached, I didn't avoid her as she greeted David softly, and he responded in a gentle tone. Suddenly, Gina looked at me and asked, "Sophia, you probably don't know me." Before she could finish speaking, I interrupted, "Even though I haven't met you, I've heard of your name." She looked at me silently, seemingly waiting for my response. After a moment, I suddenly remembered what David's friend had said. He mentioned that Gina had dumped David back then, and had climbed onto a better second-generation man. I looked at her and bluntly asked, "Gina, are you back now because your foreign boyfriend can't support you anymore?" Gina's expression darkened at my words. It was David who grabbed my hand and apologized to her. "Sophia, she's not like that." Before he finished, I pulled my hand away. "David, I meant to say that." Gina's tears fell as if on cue. I watched her performance with a smile, saying nothing. The child beside him suddenly said to me, "You're a bad woman for stealing my dad." My head buzzed and suddenly couldn't keep up. David stared wide-eyed, looking at the child in a daze. So, their child was already this big. I truly was a joke. This child was a year younger than Anna. Coincidentally, before, David and I also had a child. At that time, there were a lot of things going on at work, and David had to go abroad for a while. Memories flooded back, as if to engulf me. That day, there was blood all over me. I called an ambulance, and then I called David. David asked me if everything was all right, sounding a bit impatient. I thought he was just tired from work. Before I could say anything, I heard a woman's voice, "David, I'm scared." I didn't hear the rest of what was said. After a moment, I hung up abruptly, mustering the strength to open the door. The blood stained the floor red. Seeing that blood, I thought I was going to die. When he came back, he explained that he was talking about work with his colleagues and happened to be caught in an earthquake. But now, thinking back, perhaps it was that night. The timing seemed to match with the child's age. Anna ran over and saw the child hitting me. She pushed him away and stood in front of me, asking, "Why are you hitting my mommy?" Anna wasn't a bold child. She grew up sheltered, pampered by both families, timid and sensitive. She just couldn't bear to see me being bullied. "You guys stole my dad." Hearing this, Anna looked at me with teary eyes and burst into tears. She hugged David's leg and asked him, "Daddy, you're Anna's daddy, right?" David seemed to still be in shock, standing frozen in place. Seeing that David didn't respond to her, she turned to me and asked again, but this time I didn't comfort her. Because I didn't know the exact answer myself. If I told her it wasn't true, what if it turned out to be true later on? Seeing Anna running out, the housemaid followed her, worried, rushing out. She didn't know what was happening, she just saw Anna crying sadly. I picked her up and tried to hand her to the housemaid. "Be good, Anna, go home with Grandma." I don't want to, if I go out again, Daddy will be lost." She unreasonably threw a tantrum on me, struggling to find David. I pushed her into the housemaid's arms. "Take Anna home, I'll be back soon." After Anna walked away, I grabbed the child's hand and started heading towards David's house. Seeing this, David reached out to pull me back, saying, "He's not my child, Sophia, trust me." Hearing this, Gina's tears fell like a kite with a broken string. "David, have you forgotten that night you were drunk?" "Gina, I was drunk, but I didn't do anything." It seemed like they had to figure things out. But before they could say much, Gina cried even harder. And David, frowning, began to explain. I looked at him and asked, "Was it just you two that night?" He answered, "Yes." "Well, in that case, what more is there to say?" The fact was established, and I had no room for any fantasies. Gina didn't say anything after that. But I could still imagine what happened that night. I looked at David and then at the child beside him. With a sarcastic laugh, I said, "Gina, you can rest assured, I'm giving David back to you." I took off the ring from my neck, grabbed Gina's hand, and put the ring on her finger. The loosely fitting ring just happened to fit perfectly on her hand. I was stunned for a moment, but soon realized. Everything about marrying David was done according to Gina's preferences. Now it was just about setting things right. I had planned to take the child to David's parents' house to show them what he had done. But halfway there, I suddenly stopped in my tracks. I let go of the child's hand. His parents had been so kind to me, and I couldn't bear to disrupt their lives. Since it had already happened, I decided to leave it at that. The chaotic scene, accompanied by Gina's crying, made my head feel like it was going to explode. I glanced at Gina and then looked at David, saying, "Since the child is yours, take good care of them." Before I could finish, I saw my father coming from a distance. He had a cane in his hand and swung it at David. He stumbled a bit, but managed to stay on his feet. My father stood there, looking at him, and swung the cane at him again. This time, he didn't hit David because Gina hugged him. The cane landed solidly on Gina instead. They embraced each other. Even I had to admit, they looked good together. My father, seeing this, questioned him, "When you married Sophia, did you promise the same? Is this how you treated her?" When David married me, he made great promises. He said he would treat me well, be good to me for a lifetime. But a lifetime is long, and he never changed because he never loved me. I grabbed my father's hand and whispered, "Let it go." The once youthful man was now filled with gray hair. He looked at me, his heartache evident in his eyes, and said, "How can I let it go, how? What else can be done?" That drunken night, with just the two of them, everything that needed to happen happened. Except for the two parties involved, no one knew what had occurred. I looked at David and whispered, "David, I wish you both happiness." As he stepped back, he stumbled. In a hoarse voice, he replied, "Okay." When I went back home, Anna was still crying. She ran up to me and asked if the child had nothing to do with her father. I knelt down, embraced her, and softly said, "Anna, I'm sorry, Mommy doesn't know either." I didn't want to tell her the truth, nor did I want her father to become a fallen figure in her eyes. Week after week passed. David never came to see me again. David's parents had no idea what had happened, only that my father acted coldly towards them. I talked to my father a few times, and he kept yelling that he wouldn't bother with me anymore. Ever since Anna heard about the child, she rarely asked about David. It seemed like she understood something. When I went back to pack my things, I pushed the door open and saw Gina and David sitting at the dining table. The scene was reminiscent of how our family used to be, with the only difference being the people occupying the seats. Seeing me, David awkwardly stood up. He came over to me and glanced back at the woman and child eating. I walked past him and into the master bedroom. The bedsheet was crumpled, and the man and woman in this house were all in pajamas. What happened was obvious. Looking at this scene, I chuckled softly, feeling the mockery ready to spill out. Before coming, I held on to the hope that David would present some compelling evidence. If he explained himself reasonably and begged me, maybe I would have softened. But I never expected it to turn out this way. Then I went to Anna's room to pack her things into a box. Before I could finish, David closed the door. He looked at me, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me into his arms. I looked up at him and asked softly, "When do you have time to go and get a divorce together?" His voice rang in my ears, "Sophia, after we get divorced, take good care of yourself and Anna." His words made me sick. They were all sitting down to eat as a family of 3, but they couldn't stop thinking about my child. I hesitated for a while before finally mustering up the courage to ask, "Is the child hers, yours?" He frowned tightly, as if reluctant to admit the answer, but eventually conceded with just one word. The answer was what I expected, but hearing it still made me sick to my stomach. I pushed him away, ran to the bathroom, and leaned over the toilet, dry heaving. He patted my back, but I pushed him away, saying, "David, please, stop disgusting me." I stood up, rinsed my mouth out, back and forth moving things a few times. David followed behind me, and I didn't know what he was going to say. I didn't want to hear him speak. As I left, I saw David in the rearview mirror staring blankly at the back of my car. After a short while, Gina came down from upstairs. She wrapped her hands around David's waist, like a devoted loving couple. I avoided looking at them and focused on the road. When I was moving things inside, Anna ran over, constantly looking back. I didn't know what she was looking at. During my second trip moving things, she couldn't help but ask me, "Mom, where's Dad? Why didn't Dad come?" I put things down in the living room, squatting down, pulling Anna into my arms, and whispered to her, "Dad won't be coming anymore." My father grunted and said it's better he doesn't show up, that the world is better off without him. Anna couldn't stand anyone speaking ill of her father, pursed her lips, tears streaming down her cheeks. Before my father could console her, I stopped him. Anna looked at me, reached out and hugged my neck, asking, "Dad doesn't want Anna anymore." I gently stroked her back and reassured her softly, "Dad still loves Anna, he's just been very busy lately, so he won't be coming around." Naturally, he was too busy. Busy taking care of his other child. David and I had agreed on the time to divorce. Just as we left, I saw David's car parked outside. On the way, neither of us said a word. I looked at his gaunt cheeks, looking like he was in his early 20s. He was this thin back in college. Didn't eat well, always buried himself in the library. I teased him, saying, "David, are you not getting enough allowance from Auntie? Do you need me to chip in a bit?" He playfully tapped my head, laughing, "Oh, you figured it out. Uncle, you're giving me too much allowance, look how much weight you've gained." At 19, I thought he might have a slight liking for me. Even if it was just a tiny bit of a crush. After graduation, David's father's health deteriorated, so he had to take over the business and attend social events. Irregular eating habits, coupled with days of heavy drinking, worsened his stomach problems, and he grew thinner. I always thought he was busy with work and didn't have time to eat. But looking back now, that was around the time Gina had just gone abroad. He was drowning his sorrows in alcohol. After we got married, I tried to help him take care of his health. But I couldn't cook, and I almost set the kitchen on fire once. He cleaned up the kitchen, leaned against the counter, wrapped his arms around my waist, pulled me close to him, and said, "You've never done household chores. If your dad finds out I made you cook, he might break my legs." I stammered and didn't say anything. He kissed my cheek and softly said, "I'll take care of these things from now on." Learning to cook was abandoned. But every day, I had the maid cook for him and then delivered the food to his office. Day after day, year after year. After Anna was born, he began to take better care of himself. Honestly, before Gina returned, he was a good father. He always granted Anna's requests. When Anna had cavities, I prohibited her from eating candy, but he would sneak it to her. Anna would smile, with the candy still in her mouth. I scolded her, and she threw a pot at David. Then they both stood facing the wall as a timeout. David called her a silly girl, saying she can't even hide that she ate candy properly. Anna grabbed him, whispering in what she thought was a low voice, "Dad, next time, break the candy into small pieces, then Mom won't see it." Little did I know that I could hear every word they were saying, but I pretended not to. I thought we would keep living like this, but things changed unexpectedly. We were no longer husband and wife. We went our separate ways. Without me saying a word, David suddenly said, "Sophia, let's not see each other again." I was taken aback and looked at him, replying, "Okay." After a moment of silence, he took out a stack of documents from the glove compartment and handed it to me. "This is for you and Anna. It's half of my company's shares and all the properties." He only kept the house we used to live in. The thought of Gina living there now made me sick. I took the pen David handed me and signed on it. Then he handed me the ink pad, and I pressed my fingerprint on it. 2 copies of the documents were made, one for him and one for me. I put the one I received in my bag. As I was about to get off the car, he locked the door. I was puzzled about what he was going to do. Seeing him taking out the ring I gave Gina and handing it back to me, he said, "Sophia, believe it or not, when I married you, I was intending to live a good life with you." Reading his words, I couldn't help but laugh. A person who wants to live a good life would not travel abroad to meet his ex-girlfriend and have a child with her. Some things are better left unsaid, and I didn't want to hear them. David stared at me intently. The words hypocritical kept circling in my mind. I saw Gina knocking on the car window while holding the child's hand. I glanced at David and said, "You can live a good life with Gina. I won't disturb you." David remained silent. After a moment, I added, "I'll try to keep Anna away from you as much as possible." "Okay," he replied and unlocked the car door. I threw the ring he gave me into the bushes. It wasn't mine, and I didn't want it. As I walked away, I heard Gina crying. The sound annoyed me, so I quickened my pace until her cries faded away. To avoid questions from David's elders, Anna and I moved back to the apartment we lived in before we got married. Anna was complaining that I forgot to bring her candied hawthorns. I hugged her and apologized softly. She looked up and asked, "Mom, when will Dad come? I haven't seen him in a long time." Hearing her question, I thought for a while and replied softly, "Tomorrow, Mom will have Simon take you to see him." Simon and David were friends and my college classmates. When the company needed someone to manage the overseas division, I brought him in. Later, when I was no longer at the company and needed a trustworthy person to manage it, I brought him back from abroad. He didn't complain at all. I knew David had a crush, as he told me. He advised me to keep an eye on David and not travel abroad too often. I didn't listen then, but now I realize it was a joke. David didn't like how close I was to Simon, so we grew apart. Unexpectedly, even David turned against me, while Simon always stood by my side. Tomorrow is the annual meeting of David's company, and it's fine for Anna to go and have fun. I took the child to the bottom of the building and saw Gina walking in front of me in high heels. I handed the child to Simon and couldn't help but be curious, so I took a look. In the past, I used to stand by David's side at such events, but now someone else was there. Their child was playing with Anna below. He held a cake and smashed it onto Anna's face. David saw it, but pretended not to, stepping back. It was as if the one being bullied was not his daughter. Anna looked around for David for a long time. Seeing no adults, she felt aggrieved, but just pouted, not daring to cry. I hurried over, wiped the cream off her face with a tissue, and held her in my arms, saying, "Anna, Mom is here." When Anna saw me, she couldn't hold back her tears and said, "Mom, Dad saw it, but didn't help me." Her words stunned me. I felt that David was really cold-hearted. It was obvious that Anna was the one he watched grow up, but maybe since they were both his biological children, he didn't show any bias. Anna's tears wet my shoulder, and I had never seen her so wronged before. Seeing Simon coming, I asked him to hold Anna. Then I passed by the child and walked straight outside. Gina was cuddling with David, whispering. I wanted an explanation, but seeing them like that, I didn't want to approach. One side, the child saw Simon distracted and about to run away. He reached out, grabbed him, dragged him in front of me, and asked Anna in my arms, "Anna, how did he bully you? Uncle will help you." He was struggling to speak clearly. Simon could also guess what happened. He dragged the child back into the hall, grabbed a piece of cake. Before I could stop him, he slapped the cake directly on the child's face. The child's crying was loud and attracted a crowd. People from outside also came in. Seeing the cake plate in Simon's hand, David started accusing without distinction, "Simon, he's just a child, how could you?" Anna saw this, started crying again, as if realizing her father didn't love her enough. "David, watch your son." Simon pushed the child towards David. Then he held Anna with one hand, grabbed my hand with the other, and left the scene. When we got to the underground parking lot, Anna gradually calmed down. He whispered, "Anna, remember, treat others how they treat you, this is called karma." Anna lay on his shoulder, sobbing. Simon sat in the driver's seat, looking at me frequently. I smiled and asked, "What? Do you pity me or Anna more?" He also smiled, but didn't say anything. After a while, he said in a slightly annoyed tone, "I warned you before, you didn't listen, this is your own doing." Maybe he thought what he said was too harsh, so he didn't speak again. I didn't speak either, just turned to look out the window at the neon lights. It was the same city, the same night, but the person by my side had changed. Maybe seeing me quiet for so long, he asked me, "We have a meeting at David's company tomorrow, are you coming?" I looked back at Anna in the back seat, thought for a while and said, "I'll go." Simon said I was becoming less like myself. I used to be decisive, but after marriage, I revolved around my husband and children, occasionally caring about his marriage. He smirked and said casually, "I actually wanted to marry into your family, but it's a pity you married early." I chuckled, "Come on, with your good condition, you should buy a house early and find a suitable person. The word marriage hasn't even been spoken yet." He stopped me, "Sophia, focus on living your own life first." I smiled awkwardly. Perhaps a carefree life was what he wanted. I had been nosy. Anna was woken up by our conversation. She opened her eyes slightly, looked at Simon and then at me. Simon leaned over and whispered, "Uncle has gone." She made a sound of acknowledgement, then turned her head and went back to sleep. He took a few steps forward, then came back, "Anna, you must come tomorrow." I didn't understand what he meant by must come. But as soon as I arrived at the company, Simon's assistant hurriedly came up to me and told me that David and Simon had started fighting. I pushed open the door to the rest area, and saw Simon pinning David down and hitting him. I called out to Simon, he turned to look at me, his face scratched. David reached out to hit Simon. I ran up, grabbed Simon, and took all the hits on my back. David supported me and tried to talk to me. I felt looking at him was unnecessary. I gently pushed his hand away and stood up. Simon seemed like a child who had done something wrong, touching his nose and smiling at me. Then he stood behind me. I told him to leave, walked to the door, and heard David call my name. I paused for a moment, but this time, I didn't look back. Glancing back at Simon, he was still smiling secretly. "Simon, what are you laughing at?" He leaned against the wall, smiling, "Are you mad because I fought him?" I didn't respond, looked at his face and poked him. He winced. Seeing his reaction, I teased him, "Oh. Seems like Simon can feel pain too. Why did you fight with David? Both of you are 60 years old combined." Before I could finish, he pulled me into his arms, saying softly, "He treated you unfairly. I won't allow that, Sophia." He said this very seriously. Seeing my lack of reaction, he added, "Sophia, I won't let anyone bully you, not anyone." I looked up at him, struggled a bit, trying to break free from his grasp. But to my surprise, he held on even tighter. In the distance, I saw David standing not far away. I thought, David couldn't care less. Now, with his sweetheart by his side, he couldn't see me at all. In a low voice, Simon whispered in my ear, saying, "I haven't been to my uncle's for dinner in a long time." Before he could finish, I already knew what he was up to. Today, David would be coming home. When I glanced back and saw David walking away, that's when he finally let me go. As we walked out of the company gate, Simon threw his coat over his head, leaving just one eye peeking out. He escorted me home, giving me all kinds of instructions, asking me to have dinner at my dad's place. I didn't really listen. But I couldn't ignore my dad's phone call. Upon entering the house, I saw Simon carrying a large bag of toys for kids. Then he went back to the car to bring in some specialty products. My dad looked delighted, saying, "Simon, take it slow, take it slow." Anna looked up at me, then at Simon, and went over to find a bag of candy among those things. She couldn't open it, glanced at me, and passed by me directly. She ran to Simon, handing him the bag of candy, smiling broadly, "Uncle Simon, can you help me open it?" Simon squatted down, opened the packaging, handed her one, and popped it into her mouth. I walked over, reaching out. Anna reluctantly handed the candy to me, not even wanting to look at me. I also didn't want to pay attention to her, so I went into the house, leaving the three of them outside. I saw Simon and Anna whispering to each other, not sure what they were talking about. Until I saw the candy in Anna's mouth. Simon. He turned back to look at me, then Anna approached. Anna ran over to him, and he picked her up and ran, saying, "Don't let your mom catch us, or I'll be in trouble too." I followed behind them. Anna laughed happily in his arms, saying, "Mom can't catch us, Mom is silly." Before she finished speaking, they bumped into David's family. Anna saw David holding a little boy's hand. Her expression changed slightly. She glanced away, and didn't even look at him. She nestled in Simon's neck, not saying a word. David saw this, let go of the boy's hand, tried to hug Anna. She resisted and didn't want to go over. Simon took a few steps back, creating some distance between them, and Anna's expression became more natural. She looked at David, asking in a childish voice, "Are you my daddy?" David's expression changed, took a few steps forward, and replied softly, "Anna, I am your dad." Anna shook her head, pointing to the little boy on the ground, saying, "No, you're not my dad, you're his dad." After that, she nestled back in Simon's neck, not saying another word. I saw David frozen in place, his gaze fixed on Anna without blinking. Just as he was about to speak, Gina stepped forward, held David's hand, seeming to comfort him. David shook her off, looked at me. There seemed to be regret in his eyes. I tugged at Simon's sleeve, and he turned to look at me. With just one glance, he understood what I meant. I followed behind him, wanting to go home. David called out to me, asking, "Sophia, how have you been recently?" I turned to look at him, with a hint of doubt, made a sound of agreement, then quickly realized, "I've been doing great, without you. I'm doing just fine." Simon turned back to look, chuckled. The ridicule in his laugh was about to spill out. Anna asked him, "Uncle Simon, what are you laughing at?" Some people don't know how to appreciate. He held Anna and ran back, making her laugh all the way. When he was taking us back that night, he noticed Anna wasn't in high spirits, so he went upstairs to play with her. Anna asked me, "Mom, does Dad still want me?" I didn't answer, unsure how to respond. Seeing me silent, she sat on the carpet, pretending to be an adult, shaking her head, saying, "Forget it then." Simon tossed a doll to her, softly saying, "Anna, how about Simon being your dad?" She continued to play the adult, considering. I tossed a pillow at him, he caught it, then flirtatiously threw a glance at me. "What do you think? Consider it. I have looks, I have a good figure, and I even have some savings. The key is I can still marry into the family." His words hit me bit by bit. I knew he probably wasn't joking. He's good to me, good to Anna, but not without any ulterior motives. When I saw him, he made an excuse, "Sophia, I was just kidding, don't take it seriously." I just replied and saw him off. Anna looked at him and reached out for him to hold her. She whispered something in Simon's ear, but I couldn't hear what she said and didn't bother to ask. As she was about to fall asleep, I was going out to handle some work when suddenly she grabbed the hem of my clothes. She said, "Mommy, Uncle Simon is very nice." Then she closed her eyes, looking as if she had fallen asleep. Closing the door behind me, her words kept echoing in my ears. "Simon is very nice." He knew I liked David. Back in college, he helped me get noticed by David. He knew I liked jewelry, so when I turned 25, he gave me a piece of jewelry designed by one of my favorite designers. I told him David didn't like me meeting him often, and he respected that by not meeting me anymore unless necessary. Looking back, he did truly understand me. If I had met him before David, I might have fallen for him. But right now, he and I were not meant to be. I focused on work and pushed aside any lingering thoughts until late at night when sleep finally crept in. The next day, after dropping Anna off at the kindergarten, I went to work at the company. Days passed by in a routine. Post-divorce life wasn't as unbearable as I had thought. In fact, it felt somewhat liberating. Previously, everything I did was to suit David's likes and dislikes. He disliked me being a strong independent woman, drinking in front of him, or even the way I slept. Since parting ways with him, I could finally do all those things. Simon was always by my side, helping me navigate through some tricky situations in work and life. He even moved from the hotel to a house opposite mine. One day, he was cooking and there was a doorbell. When I opened the door, I saw David holding a big bouquet of roses. We stood face to face, and I showed no intention of inviting him in. He said, "I came to see Anna." I turned to Anna, called her over, and asked her if she wanted to have dinner with him. Anna shook her head and softly said, "He's not my dad, he belongs to someone else." The first time she said this, David probably thought Anna was just upset with him, but when she repeated it, his eyes widened, face turning pale. He slowly squatted down beside Anna, attempting to talk to her. Anna turned her head, pointed to Simon bringing out the food, and said, "My dad is over there." I was startled. David couldn't believe it either. He seemed unsteady on his feet, then sat on the ground and asked, "Anna, what did you say?" "I don't like you, don't come to my house anymore," she said as she tried to close the door. She used to depend a lot on David, but ever since she heard a boy bullying her and calling David dad, she changed her attitude towards him. She no longer liked David. Simon overheard Anna's words and came closer, asking her to repeat. She turned away, grunted, "Uncle Simon, wait until you catch up with Mommy before saying anything." Simon glanced at me. I didn't meet his eyes, and instead, I called Anna to wash her hands for dinner. Seeing this, Simon sighed deeply. At night, after Anna fell asleep, he took me to his house. There were 2 glasses of red wine on the table. I didn't move forward, just looked at him, and asked softly, "Why did you bring me here?" He came from behind, wrapped his arms around my waist, and rested his head on my shoulder. "Sophia, I like you." "But Simon," he turned me around and kissed my lips lightly. Just a brief, gentle kiss. He said, "It's okay, Sophia, I can wait for you for a lifetime." A lifetime, that's so long. I heard from my dad that David had been deceived. Ever since they changed the lady of the house, they cut off ties with David, not allowing him to come home or acknowledging Gina, his supposed daughter-in-law. When we returned home that night, we saw David smoking under my building. I wanted to approach him, but Simon held my wrist. I turned to look at him with a question in my eyes. We stayed silent, staring at each other for what seemed like a minute before he finally let go and said, "Go on then." David had visible stubble on his chin. He was someone who cared a lot about his appearance, so how could he let himself go like this? I looked at him, and he looked back at me. After a while, he said, "Sophia, come back to me, I miss you so much." Upon hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh. While smiling, I asked, "David, are you out of your mind?" Suddenly, he grabbed my wrist and explained that he and Gina's child had no biological relationship. The DNA report was forged by Gina. It had nothing to do with him. I listened in silence until he was done, then I pulled my hand away. "So what, David? You were deceived, what does that have to do with me?" "I'm sorry, Sophia, please come back to me, okay?" Saying this, he tried to hug me. I took 2 steps back, distancing myself from him. "David, we are in the past tense now, we will never go back." I walked up to Simon and extended my hand to him. He held my hand and glanced back at David. At night, when Anna was asleep, Simon came to my room to sleep and leaned down to give me a light kiss on my lips. He deepened the kiss afterwards. My breath was taken away. I pushed him away, and he finally let go. Holding me tightly, he asked me, "Please don't leave, okay?" His tone was pleading. Simon has always lived freely and unrestrainedly. I had never seen him like this before. After waiting for a long time without my response, he asked me again. I just murmured in agreement and softly asked, "Where do I go?" "By David's side." "I won't go back." I responded quietly in the darkness. But that night, he still didn't let go of me, holding me tightly as if afraid I would run away. The next morning, he woke up as soon as I moved. His first question was, "Where are you going?" I looked at him and smiled lightly. "I'm just going to have some water." He looked surprised and flustered, and this lasted for about a week. Anna shook her head, saying, "Uncle Simon, my mom won't run away." But he just wouldn't listen. Until the three of us went to the beach to play. He took out a ring and put it on my hand. As I was about to take it off, I heard him say, "We don't have to get married. I'm willing to wait for you, but Sophia, you have to give me a status." And the ring stayed on. I really didn't want to get married again. I thought he was going to bring up the topic of marriage next. But he never did. In this life, in this house, the three of us, eating 3 meals a day, living through all 4 seasons, will make the right decisions at the right time.